Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot to talk about this week, a lot going on, mostly on the negative side. But let's talk about something that's not so dire, even though it does harken back to my childhood. Don't make any comments about Jurassic Park there, Dr. Lopkin. But anyway, I remember when I was a kid, and I was at YMCA camp, and I'd have the old transistor radio and everyone was listening to the All-Star game. I'm talking in the 70s, okay, early 70s. And it was almost as big as, and by the way, I was a National League fan. I was a Chicago Cubs fan at the time, and not even close to National League because they embraced diversity. An example of diversity actually being a positive thing. American League was all white, and every year they got their ass handed to them, deservingly so, not about racism, but because the National League was just so much better. And it was awesome. My best friend was a Minnesota Twins fan, and after a while it was like, hey, Dave, my friend was Dave, there's just no way around it. After, I think it was 10 years in a row the National League won. But the point is, has it become actually irrelevant? And shouldn't they just have a mid-year break and maybe have the home run derby or maybe some skill events? I mean, with free agency and interleague play, like, really, what's the point?
Yeah, interleague play did take a lot away from the All-Star game. This year, however, I think it was politics that took more away because,
oh God, yeah.
They moved in to protest Georgia's new voting rights law, which, of course, was lied about ad infinitum by the Democrats and by Joe Biden, and they were called out by the Washington Post about these lies. But they moved the game from a primarily African-American city to a primarily white
African-American city, by the way, too. Yes.
To a primarily white city.
Vanilla white.
This is how they're trying to fight for diversity. And when I was a kid, I used to stay up late to watch the All-Star game. It was a big thing. This year, I did not watch, and apparently I'm not the only one, because last night's game had the lowest ratings in MLB history.
Wait, I have to interject something. I have to, because you brought up, as always, Dr. Lopkin, an amazing point. Because it's not only MLB. Forget about the nuances, and dinosaurs like me really don't fall into the equation from a marketing standpoint. But isn't it really bigger than that? The NBA, lowest ratings like ever, has wokeism backfired. People need a release. Everyone's human. I always looked at football when I was a kid, or baseball. Yes, of course, there were a couple of things, maybe Kurt Flood, whatever, years ago. But it was just an escape. I mean, it's really corporations kowtowing, not because I don't think they really believe in any of this or most of it. It's just an expedient way to not be chastised and marginalized and basically have impacts on their profit. But I mean, the NBA, these guys are getting paid when one season more than you could ever make in a lifetime, and they're bitching and moaning. LeBron James, stop whining.
Yeah, it has become ridiculous. And people are tuning out. Sports used to be an escape. It was, you sat down, you watched a game, you didn't have to think about your job, you didn't have to think about politics, you just enjoyed the game. And it was more about the person too. That's another thing that's missing. You had real characters. Hacksaw Reynolds, Joe Namath. I mean, you can have a list go on. It wasn't about. They were real, and they weren't creations of marketing departments like they are now. They were really interesting people on their own rights. There were interpersonal conflicts that you would follow. Yesterday was actually the 11th anniversary of George Steinbrenner's passing away, and how Facebook brings up your memories. And when George Steinbrenner passed away, I had made a joke on Facebook. I said, at 6:30 a.m. this morning, George Steinbrenner passed away. At 6:45, he fired Billy Martin again. Because George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin would go at it. It was personalities. Yeah. Now it's this
100%
diluted bull.
Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin, remember that in the bullpen?
Yes.
I'm sure you were. Not in the bullpen, in the dugout. That was amazing. So now we're at a point where we are, and I think your last comment before we move on, it's not just MLB baseball. It's people and that's what liberalism does, because they're sipping Chardonnays and having sushi. They don't understand, and they don't even like the very fans that are supporting. Am I not correct in that?
No, that's absolutely correct. And what's really ironic is that the folks that MLB kowtowed to in this case aren't baseball fans. They're not the core audience. And in fact, there was a video going around social media over the weekend. The Mets and Yankees played interleague play just before the All-Star break. And a video went around because a left-wing wacko took a MAGA hat off of somebody and stole it. Security stopped him. They gave the hat back. And in the video, you see a huge group of people. Now, remember, this is New York City. This is liberal central. You had a huge group of people cheering on the guy to put the MAGA hat back on. He puts the MAGA hat on, and the crowd went wild. So these left-wing nutballs that MLB was kowtowing to, they're not the people going to the games.
That is my exact point, Dr. Lopkin. They're up here totally isolated. The Nancy Pelosi kind of visionaries, only now in corporate, and no guts at all. Look at the Greatest Generation hitting the beach on Normandy, and these guys in a snap, when a little bit of pressure, they cave like a cheap suit.
Yes, they did.
So moving on, we have, again, I hate to bring up my age, but I'm sorry, Dr. Lopkin, it's awful. Having a younger guy like you as our team here. I remember, well aware, I was in high school in the late 70s, high school and college in the late 70s, and I totally remember Jimmy Carter's hyperinflation. And I'm sorry to bring up another baseball icon. It's deja vu all over again, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
It really is. We are seeing that happen again. And Biden's response to all of this is he's throwing money at the problem. We've got an extended child tax credit, and which most people actually are opting out of because they want to take the tax credit on their taxes on April 15th. But they're throwing money, and basically he does not understand economics. He does not understand that he's talking about, if you can't hire people, you have to pay more. Well, guess what? That's pushing costs even higher, raising inflation again. People, when their salary is going up or they're getting this payout from the government, it's meaningless because inflation is making the value nothing. And he does not understand that.
Yeah, but let's be clear. I teach at a college in Connecticut, and I would have to say a first-year economics student would know that when you have the beginnings of inflation, God knows where it's going to go, the last thing, Keynesian economics, you don't throw more money into the equation. It's supply and demand, the value of we're headed to like the Weimar Republic. I mean, and when you always, or anyone says Biden this, I don't think Biden's behind. I don't think doesn't even know what day it is. How does that sound?
Well, 53% of America agrees with you. We talked about a poll last week that 53% of Americans do not believe Biden is in charge.
Well, also hearkening back to days gone by, late 70s, Jimmy Carter, hyperinflation. I believe, and it's not just me, that Jimmy Carter lost the election because of two reasons. Number one, the Iran-Contra, the
Iranian hostages.
Yep, Iranian hostage situation and hyperinflation. Politically, this is very dangerous for the Democrats because, in the international front, you have a emboldened Iran basically not even worrying about kidnapping American citizens in America, okay? And basically you're looking at hyperinflation. So you really have, again, deja vu all over again.
It really is. There's a lot going on right now that mirrors the 70s. And,
except for the music, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, no, we won't even get into that. But, but I mean, yes, and we're going to see interest rates start to tick up because the Fed has to raise interest rates to try to keep inflation, in check. But
many people say that the Fed is really unlike Paul Volcker, who was around in the early 80s, who was courageous and brilliant, broke the back on inflation, knowing that he would take the brunt of a recession. But I think our Fed is inept, politically contaminated, and slow at the switch. I mean, come on, really? You're not doing anything about this? You're not warning about this?
I'm going to disagree with you that they're politically motivated. They are slow at the switch. However, the Fed has always been slow at the switch, even going back to Volcker, because the Fed has always been very reactive, not proactive, True. And they need to get ahead of this. Now, right now, they're actually in a good position to help stop the inflation because interest rates have been so low. They can raise interest rates without crippling the economy. Now, will they do that? I don't know.
And that's the difference between now and Paul Volcker, because interest rates were really high and he put him into the stratosphere. So we'll see how that goes. Again, on the international front, very interesting, and I think it has implications domestically as well. Cubans protesting communism, the world denouncing communism, and you have people who come over here from Poland and Russia and basically telling about the horrors of socialism and communism, but yet the Squad and others, and Biden, whatever he's doing, is moving towards the very situation that made America great and what the world is running away from.
Yeah, it absolutely amazes me that every policy the Squad is putting forth is basically what the Cubans are now protesting against. And let's be clear about this. They are protesting carrying American flags. And remember, this isn't like Black Lives Matter, because we have the right to protest in this country. They don't have that in Cuba. They are taking their lives in their hands by protesting against communism, against socialism. The entire world has already seen that socialism fails. And yet the left in this country thinks, oh, well, we can do it better.
Well, isn't it interesting? This does have political implications, doesn't it? As in terms of how Biden and his administration handles this, correct?
It has a lot of political implications, most notably the fact that Florida has always been considered a swing state. Now, with Biden and the Democratic Party pushing towards the left, there is a large Cuban population in Florida that ran from this. So they are voting Republican. They are not supporting the left wing of the Democratic Party. So you're seeing this swing state go almost reliably red.
I think that's going to happen more and more. Actually, I think what you're going to do is especially with the census figures and how that's going to work out. I think you're going to have more of, and I don't think it bodes well for America. More on East and West Coast and Illinois against the rest of the country. That's not really great for democracy, is it, Dr. Lopkin?
No, it really isn't. But again, what the Democrats are doing is backfiring on them, because there was somebody pulled out. I'm blanking on his name, but he's an African American Republican who is running for governor of California in the runoff election, and he pulled out some statistics on the Trump 2016 and 2020 elections. And in 2020, Trump got double the African-American vote that he did in 2016. In 2020, he got a much larger Hispanic vote than he did in 2016. So the audiences that the Democrats are taking for granted and that they're trying to convince they have to depend on the Democrats, they're starting to turn Republican because they know the Democrats are not helping them.
Well, if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, in this case, I believe it. That's what this whole woke culture is. They knew that African Americans were leaving the reservation. What do you do to make them a victim again? You divide them divide and conquer against the rest of the United States, if you will. Create scabs that weren't really there to begin with. And now you have a victimization culture like you created in the 60s.
Exactly. And that's what the Democrats are counting on. And that's why they're fighting the voter security laws that are being passed around the country, because they know in a fair election, they have lost mainstream America.
No question about it. Final item on the agenda. Very concerning, because in spite of how crazy we were domestically and woke culture and whatever, our military, I never questioned our military. There's been now 3 or 4 military simulations concentrating on naval exercises that basically more than suggest we would not even draw, but we would lose to China. We're focused on being woke and having inclusion and all this, and China's worried about victory. Imagine could happen if you have a president like we do asleep at the switch. What are we going to do if they take over Taiwan? Probably nothing.
Yeah, a report came out from naval officers revealing that the Navy is completely unprepared to go to war because military officers have been trained to focus on diversity and woke and not on war games and not on winning combat. And that's what the military is for. And we're seeing this not just, the Navy was where the report came out, but take a look at what's going on in Afghanistan right now. As we pull out, over the last several days, the Taliban has moved back in. They've erased almost 20 years of our efforts. The Afghanistan forces have been surrendering. Now, remember when we had the bill earlier this year, to save America and the COVID response bill, there was a huge carve out in that bill because they were so concerned about women's rights in Pakistan. And they gave a whole bunch of money to women's rights in Pakistan. Well, guess what? Now in Afghanistan, the Taliban is turning back the clock. Women's lives are now in danger. Their rights are
not more they're in danger. They're screwed.
Yeah, their rights are being taken away. Their lives are being threatened, all because our military has been focused on this woke bullshit by the left and not being a armed force.
Well, yeah, the final thoughts. I agree 100% with that, Dr. Lopkin. But if you're Putin, if you're leaders, despots around the world, you have to shake your head and laugh. I mean, the country 75 years ago that launched D-Day, I believe we'd be completely incapable. We need diversity training before you hit the breach, and we need, who even would know what would happen? Nancy Pelosi would have an agenda in there. I think we couldn't invade Rhode Island at this point. It's pathetic.
It really is. Defensively, we're weakened. Diplomatically, we're weakened. We've got a potato at the helm. He can't even think straight. And our vice president isn't any brighter. We are being laughed at by the entire world.
That's my whole point. And all these libs that hated Trump because he wasn't a nice guy, and all these antiquated theories about allies and all that stuff. Well, guess what? Please, America, the president of the United States, okay, is not your boyfriend. He's not your husband. He's not your best pal at the bar. He's president of the United States. Trump did a lot of stupid shit, and he deserves a lot of what happened. But compared to what we have, the alternative, you have to be kidding me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a person, I don't want to eat dinner with Trump. But as a policymaker, he was right on target.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Lopkin, another good edition of Carnivore Bites. And as you mentioned last week, but it's good to reiterate that, we're found on many places right now, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin?
We are. You can find us at the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners. We'll be back next week. Take care.
See you then.